My name is Erika. I'm a front-end web developer from Toronto. In my day job, I work on big web applications with Angular and React. But today, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about exploring and building chatbots. And you can follow me at Erika Pierre on Twitter or go to my website, erikapierre.com. So let's get started. First of all, what is a chatbot? Well, it's a computer program designed by humans that tries to simulate one side of a human conversation. Originally, this was done by text, but more recently, it's been done by voice. Sometimes they're trying to emulate an actual human, and sometimes they're not. You've probably run across one in work or in life. Siri is a chatbot, Alexa is a chatbot, and maybe you even use Slack bots at work. Chatbots in 2018 are used for a variety of tasks, including searching, helping, and solving routine customer problems. Mostly they're helpers, in the same way that your regular website is, but anthropomorphized bots like chatbots are also imbued with more than just practicality. But more on that later. Let's take a step back, go a little bit into the history of chatbots. We'll start looking at the history of robots and artificial intelligence. In the 1950s, Alan Turing developed the Turing test to determine whether machine intelligence was distinguishable from human intelligence. And yes, it actually is, or can be, indistinguishable from human intelligence. But more than that, people also began to relate emotionally to chatbots in ways that weren't anticipated when they were initially beginning to look into just the intelligence aspect of it. Fast forwarding a little bit, I don't know if anybody was a child of the 2000s and maybe remembers Smarter Child, AOL Instant Messenger, but we did see a rise of text-based chatbots online at that time. They provided access to weather, sports, stock information, etc. And we can still see this style of interactive bot in the form of Slack bots, Facebook Messenger bots, and so forth. The most prominent bots of 2018, as I said, are Siri, Google Assistant, Cortana, Alexa. Essentially, they're all virtual assistants which run on various devices. They offer help on a dizzying variety of topics, as well as providing companionship and entertainment. But we should also talk about the social implications of chatbots. One thing that I found very interesting when I was dealing with building my own chatbot, which uses the web speech API, is the fact that browser developers now have the capacity to determine whose languages are considered valid, whose speech patterns and whose accents and whose dialects are legitimized. So as a Toronto-born native speaker of English, my language has been deemed acceptable. My accent is also acceptable, but my family's language, which is Haitian Creole, is not recognized. It's not considered a valid language or legitimate, and it doesn't show up on a list of languages that a browser will synthesize or recognize. So in this way, browser vendors are actually playing a big role in determining and reinforcing colonial norms about what is considered a language and what languages are considered worthwhile. And of course, the gender issue. Remember Eliza, the 1960s chatbot that turned out to be indistinguishable from a human? Well, humans tend to project a mental model of humanity onto chat-based robots, even while knowing that they are robots. And they feel and behave in similar ways towards them. So in North America, it actually makes an unfortunate sort of sense that gender-wise, almost all voice-based chatbots, as well as many text-based chatbots, are coded as female, because women are understood to be the helping gender and are perceived to be friendlier, more emotionally open, and more supportive. Bots also run the risk of perpetuating other societal issues. For example, I don't know if anybody remembers the scandal that happened around Tay, the Twitter bot. I think that was about a year ago. But essentially, she was set up to learn from the conversations that she had with other Twitter users. But predictably, within a day, Twitter users had taught Tay to tweet, wow, that's a sentence, taught Tay to tweet positively about Hitler and to also use racial slurs. This probably could have been avoided if it had been addressed while building the algorithm, but it wasn't. So that brings us to right now and to the web. The web has often been lauded for its history of open potential, But there's still a tension between the original view of the web, which was more technically open, with less Facebook and Google acting as gatekeepers, but still very limited in terms of who has access, versus a more modern understanding of the web, which is still somewhat technically open with regard to open source, but it also has a lot more diverse access to the internet in terms of who's able to use it. But social media also acts in some ways as a gatekeeper. So Facebook, Twitter, Google, all of these things, if one of them decides that they don't like you, then you're just off in a way that didn't used to be the case 15 or 20 years ago. Overall, however, technically speaking, it is probably the easiest medium to jump into. So what would an alternative to today's bots look like? I wanted to build something that would build emotional bonds and shared connections rather than just treating the bot solely like a companion or something that helps you. Essentially, I wanted to build something that I felt relatable to myself rather than something completely generic. So I will open that up for you right now. I don't think that this thing can hear me. Can anybody help me get this set up so that it can hear what I'm saying?
Absolutely, no problem.
All right. Cool. So that happened. Right, well, I spent a little bit of time working on this. If anybody wants to see it in action, come see me after this, I guess, and I'll show you because it works fine on my personal laptop. Essentially, it's just plain JavaScript on the front end. I didn't use any frameworks or anything. Then on the back end, I built a little Express server. So on the front end, if you're familiar at all with JavaScript, it's pretty straightforward. There's something attached. There's speech recognition in Chrome. Doesn't work in other browsers, unfortunately. Just Chrome has speech recognition and speech synthesis. Oh, wow. So you just create a new speech recognition object, you add an event listener, and then once it's finished listening, it adds the message to the page and then gets a response. Speech synthesis is even more simple. You essentially can just make a new speech synthesis utterance. You can choose a voice if you want to. It's really up to you. It does understand many languages, not every language, but many. You can change the pitch if you want to, the volume, and then you just say speech synthesis.speak and your utterance, and it will speak that for you. And you can sort of emulate a conversation. In terms of the back end, this was my first experiment with machine learning and natural language processing. So that was really interesting. I don't think that JavaScript is strictly the right option for this, but for a fairly small data set, it wasn't too bad. So essentially, it's using Brain.js classifier, which is a node module that does all of the heavy lifting for you, essentially. You give it an array of text, and you tell it what to classify it as. And I just saved it into a JSON file, loaded it up, and you just say, classifier, please classify this, and it returns what kind of text it thinks it is. I was also using sentiment analysis to do the same thing, which you can see here. Const sentiment is require sentiment. You feed it a string, and it tells you how positive or negative it thinks that string is. So you can see that there. There are some technical limitations, of course. The Web Speech API has limitations on understanding. It's computationally expensive to do this in the browser versus requesting it from the API, but if you request it from the API, it can also be quite slow. So those are two things that I kind of ran into when I was building this project. In general, these algorithms can be something of a black box, so you don't necessarily know how they're learning what they're learning. And the other issue is that they can end up being biased. You can either feed them, well, you can feed them biased information, and it learns how to be biased based on that, the same way that Tay did, the Twitter bot that we discussed a few minutes ago. So I'm just wondering what the future of chatbots and artificial intelligence will look like. What can it look like? I will leave that to you to answer. Thank you.